Hello. This video is about Act 3, Scene 1 in The Merchant of Venice. I'll be discussing two different versions, both movies. Just to start, this is a cow, and this is a squirrel. Whatever. Anyway, in the first version, which is a more classical version, Shylock, in his big long speech and everything that he's saying, is really getting the point across that he is human, despite the fact that he's a Jew, and despite the fact that all the Christians treat him less than human because he's a Jew. He talks, really passionately about how he has eyes, and just like Christians, and how if you tickle him, he'll laugh, and how if you poison him, he'll die, same as Christians. And there's a lot of emphasis that is put on that. And so that leads me to say that Shakespeare, specifically Shakespeare in this scene, in this version, this interpretation, whatever, is saying that we make our enemies. Our enemies don't come to us and become our enemies, but we make them our enemies. We make people our enemies by treating them the way that we do, or saying whatever we say to them. Because Shylock, he wasn't a bad guy when the play starts. Everyone treats him terrible because he's a Jew, and he has a really, really large amount of bad luck. And all of that combined turns him evil. Not evil, but turns him into the bad guy. I feel a lot of sympathy for him. And there's emphasis all over in the first classical version that is put on Shylock's anger, just all of his emotions, because when his Jewish friend comes to him, there's a lot of sadness and reminiscing about Jessica and what she's doing. And then, of course, there's anger. There's a lot of anger from Shylock in this version. And there's emphasis on that. And, I just think that's another way of saying that Shylock is human, because anger is such a human trait. And so is sadness, and all of that comes through Shylock. And there's also big effects on the people around him from his big monologue. There's prostitutes that are standing in the background, and they stop trying to seduce some guy, and they just stop and they're just looking at him, just, what is that? I'm sure it started as, what is that Jew raving about? Then it was like, when they started hearing what he was saying, they're like, oh, goodness, we need to listen to him. Anyway, in the second version, which is a more modern, set in 1920s, 1930s, Shylock, with cuts to the script and whatnot, Shylock is saying that he's justified in his anger against all the Christians because of the way that Antonio and Bassanio and, Salarino, I have it written down, Salanio and Salarino, goodness, how everyone's treating him, and how they, took his daughter, took his ducats, and he's justified in his anger, and he's justified in, eventually saying that he's going to take a pound of Antonio's flesh, whether he can use it or not. And so here I think that Shakespeare is saying that you can only push a man so far before he snaps, and I think this is a good example of having someone snap, because Shylock is saying, I'm going to take a pound of his flesh. It's weird. But the emphasis in this version is placed on how Antonio is broke. In the first version, it was mentioned, but in this version, there's real dialect that goes on about how Antonio is now, one of his ships has crashed, and now he's out of a lot of money. And there's a lot more taunting of Shylock from Salanio and Salarino, the two friends, whatever. There's a lot of taunting from them. Like, they have this kind of back and forth banter between the two of them, and they're, saying things, and the other's laughing, and then the other one will say something, and the other will laugh, which, shows a lot more anti-Semitism and hatred towards the Jew, in this case just Shylock. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed.